Jan, great to see you. We have been talking about the prospects for peace in the Middle East after the October 7th attack since the morning.
Yep.
And you are in the mid of the day. Now we're just alive, more or less, after lunch. So heavily coming here. And we are going to finish this workshop conference in the evening at 7 p.m. So it started at 9. You are in the middle.
Okay.
I'm going to present you now, and then you will have 30 minutes to speak. Is that okay with you? Something like that?
30 minutes should be fine, and then there will be some
Q&A.
comments and questions.
Yes, I'll handle the Q&A for you, but we are all eager to listen to what you have to say, all the way from Oslo. I'll present you before you start. Jan Egeland has been Secretary General of the Norwegian Refugee Council since August 2013, leading humanitarian operations with some 15,000 relief workers, serving nearly 10 million people in need across the world. From 2021 until 2023, Jan served as the eminent person of the Grand Bargain Initiative. Within this role, he was responsible for promoting and advocating for the advancement of the Grand Bargain's commitments to better serve people in need. From 2015 to the end of 2018, he was Special Advisor to the UN mediation efforts in Syria and chaired the 23-nation Humanitarian Task Force for the protection and access to Syrian civilians. Egeland served as UN Under-Secretary General for Humanitarian Affairs and Emergency Relief Coordinator 2003-2006, where he spearheaded a reform of the global humanitarian system. He has been Europe Director of Human Rights Watch, Executive Director of the Norwegian Institute of International Affairs, and serves as UN Executive Director of the Advisor to Colombia. And this is where Jan and I met, and this is how I know you. From 1990 to 1997, he was State Secretary in the Norwegian Ministry of Foreign Affairs, where he co-organized and co-initiated Oslo, as well as peace agreements in Guatemala and elsewhere. He has received several international awards. In 2006, Time magazine named Egeland as one of the 100 people who shaped the world. And I should also mention that Jan has spent a year at the Hebrew University. So Jan, you're at home. Welcome.
Thank you. It's good to be back in the Hebrew University. Spent wonderful months there. I remember sitting at the terrace of Mount Scopus overlooking the old city, reading Jerusalem Post, which was a respected international liberal paper at the time, and dreaming of studying Middle East peace efforts. I will here try to address some of the possibilities there still is to achieve the peace efforts that we tried so hard to do, but where we failed. But I will also recognize that we're living now through one of the bleakest period ever in the dramatic history of Israeli-Palestinian relations and also in the wider Middle East. Most Palestinians, Israelis, Lebanese, Syrians are looking at the future with deep anxiety, and many do not anymore believe in peace and peaceful coexistence. I, however, share what I believe is the basis for the organization of this event, namely that it's indeed in the bleakest hours that we need to discuss prospects for peace, and there can be opportunities also in the midst of the darkness. I will now, as a humanitarian leader, be critical, very critical, of the Israeli warfare in Gaza. I've been there several times. Many times before the October of last year, twice since the recent war began. I will argue that the response to the indiscriminate, horrific terror attack in Israel on the 7th of October, where hundreds of 1,200 people overall were killed, hundreds of them civilians, women, children, youth. That has nothing to do with resistance to occupation, and it has nothing to do with legitimate liberation struggles. But I will also argue in some detail that the indiscriminate attack, assault on the entire Gaza Strip is not only a systematic violation of international humanitarian law that the whole world is witnessing and shaking their head at, but it's also counterproductive for Israel's longer-term security interests. There was hardly a nation on earth that wasn't on Israel's side on the 8th of October, when the terror and the nature of it dawned upon us. And today it's the U.S. and Czechia and Micronesia and Nauru and a couple of other, Pacific islands that support the continuation of Israel's warfare. It is not in the interest of Israel. And I speak here as a lifelong friend of Israel. My brother volunteered at the Kibbutz Mitzmah Hamek in June 1967, a month after the Six-Day War. I studied at the Truman Research Institute. Indeed, I have many Israeli friends and colleagues. And as a Deputy Foreign Minister of Norway, I work intimately with Yitzhak Rabin, Shimon Peres, Yossi Beilin, when we tried through the Norwegian back channel to reach a peace agreement, and at that point also Yair Hirschfeld, whom is, I think at the conference was one of the chief negotiators. At that point, we, of course, built on Norway's close and intimate relations through the history of Israel with Israel. There was no country more pro the creation of the State of Israel in 1946, 47, 48 than Norway. And the Norwegian Secretary General of the United Nations, Trygve Lie. Norway was in favor of the Jewish Israeli state before the United States and before the United Kingdom. Now, so when we hosted the Norwegian back channel in 1992, there was, like now, little hope for any breakthrough for conflict resolution. Israel occupied the entirety of the West Bank and Gaza, as you know. The foremost representative of the Palestinians, the PLO, was listed as a terrorist organization. They were hijacking airplanes and whatnot at the time. And the Intifada had caused a lot of violence, and thousands of Palestinian youth were lingering in Israeli jails. Still, we got through this secret back channel agreement on the mutual recognition between Israel and the PLO, a declaration of principles, the establishment of the first Palestinian Authority, and a 5-year schedule for how to negotiate a comprehensive peace agreement. Because the subsequent failure and breakdown of the Oslo peace process is well known. We failed to have a breakthrough in the subsequent US-sponsored talks on such final status issues as the establishment of the Palestinian state, on what would be its borders, what would be the status of Jerusalem, what would be the future of the Israeli settlements on occupied land, and the future of the Palestinian refugees. And we were equally unable to foster the ambitious people-to-people cooperation that we had envisioned, and we failed to prevent acts of terror on both sides. What we saw in 92 to 95, the best attempt ever to get the two neighboring peoples to see each other as partners rather than enemies. In contrast, what we saw on the 7th of October and beyond, what the catastrophic consequence of the lack of mutual recognition between Hamas and Israel, and the belief that blunt violence can reach extremist goals. Hamas was never part of the peace efforts. It never recognized the right of Israel to exist. And it was very clear to me and others that they were tolerated by both sides. I remember saying, oh, how come Hamas can flourish? Why isn't Israel? Why isn't the PLO doing something about them? They try to undermine everything we're doing. And I said, no, well, there seems to be secret deals, and the enemy of my enemy is my friend, and so on. Because in the end, Hamas terror in 1996 and before killed the rest of the peace process, in my view. Peres lost the election. Netanyahu was elected on an anti-peace process platform, and which we basically shelved our Oslo process hopes. Now, any peace effort seems to be nearly impossible. The cruelty of the 7th of October attacks have on civilians, concert youth, kibbutz farmers, women, children, I think have profoundly changed how Israelis see the prospects for any deals with their neighbors. And there is, of course, on the other side, in the ruins of Gaza, and the ruins also of settler violence on the West Bank, little hope on the Palestinian side of any hopes for the future. The rule that applies to both sides, do not attack civilians, have been systematically violated by both sides. I think it's important for me as a humanitarian to say, after having visited Gaza twice in recent months, the presence of the Al-Qassam Brigade fighters and other bad guys in Gaza in no way justifies the indiscriminate warfare across the densely populated and besieged enclave, and the killings of thousands of babies, children, women, all innocent. A clear majority of all civilian homes, nearly 400,000, and most civilian infrastructure have been destroyed or damaged. The image portrayed by the Israeli military and Israeli media of a targeted, proportionate anti-terror military campaign is wrong. I am an eyewitness, along with countless European and American humanitarian workers, that the warfare has not been proportionate. There has not been the precaution nor the distinction that international humanitarian law prescribes for all warfare, also anti-terror warfare. So, there is The neighborhood that the Israeli forward lives behind before the so-called day after will be the starting point for a political and peace and reconciliation talk. This neighborhood we will all inherit. 66% of all structures in Gaza have been damaged, according to the UN Satellite Center analysis of very high resolution satellite imagery. 66%. 80% of commercial facilities are damaged, 68% of the road network. 87% of all homes in Gaza has, since the assault, become either damaged or destroyed. 19 out of 36 hospitals are out of service. 87% of schools need major rehabilitation work or complete rebuilding. So, given this extreme ferocity of the warfare and the enormous humanitarian toll, are we then given at least the access as humanitarians to help the civilian population that we need and are supposed to have under humanitarian law? The answer is no, not at all. Gaza is starved as too little aid is being permitted to enter Gaza, and aid actors are not enabled to move aid safely around the Gaza Strip to get to the people who need it the most. Again, just a few facts. And I now look at recent weeks. Between the 1st and the 9th of December this month, 8 agencies made 197 requests to Israel for coordinated movements across Gaza, inside Gaza. 43% were rejected outright. 16 were blocked or delayed on the ground by Israeli forces after initially had been approved and had to be aborted. 60% of these minimum movements to try to feed at least some of the population were either denied or blocked. In North Gaza Governorate, Israeli forces have surrounded Beit Hanun, Beit Lahia, and most of Jabalia, starving an estimated 65 to 75,000 civilians from humanitarian aid, including food, water, and medicines, for more than 60 days after launching a major military offensive on the 6th of October. Between the 1st and the 9th of December, 8 agencies attempted to reach the besieged areas in North Gaza 17 times. Israel denied 16 of these requests, and the remaining requests were initially approved but then delayed on the ground by Israeli forces. On the 22nd of September, NRC attempted to reach northern Gaza as part of a convoy with other aid agencies. The mission was aborted after Israeli forces fired warning shots in the direction of the convoy, and tanks approached with their arms aimed at our humanitarian vehicles. Shortly after the convoy pulled back, Israeli forces fired directly on a truck transporting fuel for our aid operations. On both occasions, the Israeli coordination body, the CLA, had given the vehicles the green light to approach the checkpoint from where the tanks came. On the 10th of December, one UN convoy successfully did deliver aid using the Philadelphia corridor. This is a safe corridor where humanitarians have asked for access many times, since criminal looting gangs now take nearly all of the aid, the trucks that do enter, against all odds, enter the Gaza. They are routinely looted. I've seen it myself. They are about 300 meters from Kerem Shalom, and they act with impunity. So the Israeli drones see everything, and they shoot at everyone being suspicious, but not these gangs of looters who steal the supplies to the humanitarian operations. How come that they act with impunity? This Philadelphia corridor that is safe, the only safe place since Israel bombed the civilian Gaza police, so there is no law and order there. This Philadelphia corridor is routinely denied us as access. So, looking then at how many trucks, and I will not belabor the point with too many details, but number one, the 91% of people in Gaza are, according to the scientific nutritional assessments that we use all over the world, IPC it's called, 91% of the people are according to this acute food insecure. And adequate shelter is virtually non-existent, while access to water, basic healthcare and sanitation fall well below the required minimum level for life-saving and sustaining services. In November, however, the daily average of trucks coming into Gaza was 65. It was 10% of the number of minimum trucks needed. 65 trucks per day. Look at how many trucks Tel Aviv or Oslo needs per day. Many hundreds. 65 to the 2 million civilians in Gaza. In October, it was even worse. 37 trucks per day on average for 2 million people. And these are facts by international UN and international NGO staff. Most of them are American and Europeans. Israel also continued to issue forcible relocation directives that can be issued at any point, day and night. Hundreds of thousands of people at the time are suddenly told they must leave their homes or be at risk of imminent military targeting. One of my female colleagues that I met in Gaza said that she had been in one of the schools where she was directed to go, and in the morning at dawn, drones with loudspeakers came and said, leave within the hour, take only what you can carry, bring your children, but leave now, we will attack. This was the 11th time she had been forcibly relocated since she lost her home as a mother, carer for 4 children in the north. So Israel has issued over 65 relocation directives, making 80% of the Gaza Strip off limits for Palestinians who have no possibility to enter neighboring Israel nor Egypt. There is no Poland or Turkey or Jordan for the desperate Palestinian civilians, as there was for the Ukrainians or the Syrians. International aid groups that are essential for providing relief to civilians in both Gaza and the West Bank. My organization, the Norwegian Refugee Council, has done now relief work in the West Bank and Gaza for a generation. But for the first time, we see a systematic denial and renewal of our visas and work permits by Israel. This is slowly suffocating our presence and our future response in both Gaza and the West Bank. The banning of UNRWA was one of the issues I was asked to comment upon. And of course, UNRWA is established by a General Assembly resolution that follows the General Assembly resolution that created the State of Israel. That led to the Nakba, and hundreds of thousands of Palestinians being displaced. Palestinians got UNRWA, Israel got a state. Today, the product of the first resolution is killing the product of the second one, UNRWA, and it will undermine not only relief work in Gaza and the West Bank, but also our work as independent NGOs. We are reliant on the logistics, the schools, and the health ratings of UNRWA. 12 UNRWA staff may have, at least 9 of them, participated in the horrors of the 7th of October. They betrayed everything we stand for. There were 9 out of 13,000 staff. They were fired by UNRWA even before it was proven that they were guilty. Israeli soldiers who take selfies of themselves committing grave violations and acts of violence against Palestinian women, children, detainees have not been fired and not been held accountable, nor has the settlers that are systematically violating humanitarian law and human rights on the West Bank. I've seen it myself. I've reported who attacked which village, violating which homes, which schools. Impunity continues. The organized crime of the violent settlers with subsidies from the State of Israel is continuing. So, ending. I hope we all agree that the need for a viable peace process is in 2024 at least as high and as big as in 1992. What we had then and we lack today are several things. Number one, visionary, courageous leadership on both sides. Rabin, Peres, Arafat were leaders. They were willing to push compromises. They did reach a joint initial agreement. This leadership lacks on both sides today, where extremism and populism reign, and where we have a horrifically split, divided and polarized political terrain on both sides, and on the, of course, on the Palestinian side between the terrorists in Gaza and the old and weak leadership on the West Bank. The second precondition for progress is stronger, more united, coherent, and more assertive pressure for peace, compromise, and negotiated progress from, number one, the US, and secondly, by the Europe and Arab countries like Jordan, Egypt, Saudi Arabia. There will be tensions on both sides and enemies of peace on both sides. There will be extremists on both sides. Hence, the need for much stronger, more coherent pressure for peace from the international community led by the United States. Whether a Trump administration will be willing to provide such leadership remains to be seen. But if President Trump wants to put America first, he may see the cost of the present policy, because I go nowhere in the world now without the commenting on what they see as industrial scale hypocrisy, that the attack on civilian infrastructure in Ukraine by Russia, an occupation of Ukrainian soil by Russia, merits arms assistance to Ukraine, whereas Israeli occupation and indiscriminate warfare in Gaza is tolerated. That hypocrisy is costing the West. That may sink in Washington. I hope for a new beginning. I don't see Norway playing at all the role that we did in '92. I hope the US will play that role. What we're willing to do is help provide relief for the needy and to speak the truth of what we see in an unbiased manner. And that's what I've been allowed to do today. I'm grateful for that opportunity here at the Hebrew University. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Jan. We have enough time to take some questions. Let me start. I'm going to kick off with my own question, if I may. And that has to do with your expertise on refugees. As you know, Israel doesn't recognize UNRWA anymore. It stopped cooperating with UNRWA. There's no relations now with UNRWA whatsoever. And Israel is and will do its best to stifle all UNRWA activities supporting the Palestinians. However, you and I would say the audience here, understand that the Palestinians need help. They need humanitarian help. So, in your opinion, what are the options that are open for good people like you and United Nations and others to support the Palestinians in Gaza and maybe elsewhere? Do you see any replacement for UNRWA? Do you see any metamorphosis? Do you see the United Nations creating another body? Or do you see US aid taking the role or any other organization? I mean, what is your prescription to avoid humanitarian disaster?
Well, I'm fearful of a complete breakdown because at the moment, as I said, it's this close to a horrific situation of mass death in Gaza, and it's really UNRWA schools where we operate. It's UNRWA's clinics that give the little healthcare that is there. We get UNRWA's fuel trucks to help us as NGOs. It's their infrastructure. They are the backbone. So unless Israel then says, okay, continue like now with a different name, which I think they will not, then World Food Program can easily bring food in to Gaza. We will do water trucking and so on, but no, there will be a collapse. Of course, also the whole UNRWA mandate as regards Palestinian refugees will also be lost as such. I mean, remember, these are people who still have the key of their previous home from where they were driven out in 1948 and 1967. That dream will be gone with UNRWA. One idea I would really warn against, which have been surfaced by some more extremist Israeli politicians, is to outsource it to some kind of a American business that would, in a way, run some kind of camps, detention camps, where you hand out food, etc. We would not touch such a thing. We would distance ourselves from that such a thing would have nothing to do with humanitarian principles, and that would also fail. So hopefully there will be a compromise that would enable UNRWA to continue. UNRWA has been more willing to admit failings than, as I said, the Israeli Defense Forces have.
Thank you. Questions?
Hello. Thank you for your talk. Does it work? Hello. I would like to ask whether you think that the release of the hostages and Hamas laying its arms would be a significant step towards the alleviation of the situation in Gaza, and do you know of any significant European effort to reach those aims?
I think we all have been working. I've been bringing up the hostage all the time. There's one way I can. We have no ways of reaching Hamas we could talk with them before 7th of October. Since then, they've gone on the ground. We don't see them. We have no way to reach them. Except I can speak with Al Jazeera Arabic, where I have several times said, release the hostages. It is horrific to have that kind of... I've seen how I've been dealing with kidnappings all my life in Colombia and elsewhere. A hostage situation is worse than death in many circumstances. It's tearing apart the entire family and the entire society. News came today that there seems to be an imminent agreement, and Hamas has come with some opening on a hostage deal, and Israel is looking at it. I hope and pray that that will be the start of the end to everything, that Israeli hostages are released, but also the hundreds and hundreds of arbitrarily detained Palestinians, many of them innocent. I know of Palestinian families mourning these detainees that are being maltreated in Israeli captivity.
Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you for putting before us a heartbreaking picture, which many of us know about in Gaza. I want to just pick up on one thing that you said. You said if UNRWA goes, then many Palestinians who still carry the keys to their homes, from which they were ejected in 1967 or 1948, are going to be deprived of that dream. And I wanted to know what your view is on the question of negotiating the situation of Palestinian refugees, and how you compare it with the attitude to refugees who are not part of the special treaty for Palestinian refugees, other refugees in other places in the world.
Yeah, I mean, part of it's called the United Nations Relief and Works Agency. It was supposed to give relief, and was supposed to give work, and it was supposed to work for a return of the Palestinians to their rightful homes. I mean, they had homes. They have olive orchards. They had been in many of the places from where they fled for many generations. I mean, in the drawers of the Washington and Oslo, for that matter, there are many draft agreements on all of the final status issues, including the one for the refugees. And in the solution for the refugees is going to be the same as it is for any refugee population in the world. Some cases there has to be a return to their homes. They have a direct line to a specific place, and they should be allowed home. Could be actually a limited number of people that would go back to what is today Israel. Number two, help to integrate where they are, whether that is in Jordan, West Bank, Gaza, Lebanon, Syria, Sudan, or whatever. Third, relocation to a third place. There's no other way to solve the issues. But Israel has to give something as well. I mean, how come a family that has lived safely in Brooklyn, New York, for generations have a right to, at any point, to go and settle on this Palestinian land in the West Bank? But somebody from the West Bank or inside Israel has no right to return to their home. There has to be talks about that, and the issue is not going away, even though it's fourth or fifth generation now who are sitting in Shatila camp, 75, 80 years of miserable existence in a Lebanon that do not want them and do not allow their integration.
Are you?
Thank you very much. Ari Katsovich, Hebrew University of Jerusalem, and thank you for the talk, and thank you for being a kind of practitioner or enabling the Oslo process that we teach now our students. So this is very important. I have two pointed questions. You work for the UN. So first question related to the role for the UN. Do you see any possibility for the United Nations Security Council, Chapter 7, ending the war, and added to that, whether the UN could play a role in the day after, like, East Timor, Kosovo, Latin America? And the second question, maybe it's out of desperation, because we are preaching to the choir here. And the question would be, any tips you can give us Israelis here to convince our fellow Israelis about the title of your talk, that Israel is undermining its security by doing what we are doing? Thank you.
Yeah, no, I mean, thank you. No, I'll be blunt. I mean, I've been an Undersecretary General of the UN system 5 times with different hats through my life. I know the UN well. The UN does not, and I'm sad to see it doesn't have the confidence of Israel and Israelis at all at the moment. There won't be a Chapter 7. It won't be the UN. I think it will be the US leading, and the US need to then to give security guarantees, and I think it could be a multilateral force of some kind that also provides the security guarantees that Israel deserved, but also ends the criminal settler thugs and so on. Will Israel understand that as you look at the atrocity of the 7th of October again and again on your TV screens and hear the heartbreaking stories of the hostages again and again, the rest of the world is looking at Gaza children being killed and maimed every single day. The hospital, health workers being killed, health workers being denied medicines, NRC staff not being able to get the tents with tent poles through the border crossing to our staff, for starving and cold children that are out in the rain. That's what the rest of the world sees, and they don't like it, and they find Israel as that I love as a democratic country with freedom of academic life, freedom of speech, wonderful press, but a very cruel policy in its neighborhood against innocent people, women and children. And the Qassam Brigade is there, and they are blending into the civilian population, which is a war crime, but that in no way defends destroying 80% of the homes of Gaza.
Thank you. Alfred.
Alfred Tovias from Hebrew University. I fully understand your position and what you are saying, and I am trying to explain to you some of the feelings, not many times rational, but some of the feelings of many people among Israelis that are from the left, which have difficulty in understanding the explosion of hate by Palestinians, of course of Hamas, an organized attack, the tunnels, etc. But beyond that, the perception, maybe a wrong one, that the Palestinian, what we would call the Palestinian opinion, the Palestinian people, were happy about what was going on. That is the demonstration of made by Hamas, even if it was atrocious, but it was, say, an act in the view of many Palestinians of resistance and justified, which then would explain in part, the rage and the wish of revenge, undue revenge, you can tell it, exaggerated revenge, you can say this, but anyway, the fact that many people that even in normal times count themselves among moderate people, seeing the way of acting not only of the leaders of Hamas, but of the followers of many, many people in the first hours.
Please ask the question.
So what is your reaction to that? Do you have some understanding or?
Yeah. No, listen, my friend, I understand that. And it pains me that it has come to this point where there is this rage on both sides, basically. Listen, I mean, you should read the social media hate against me and my aid workers because we're feeding Gaza children. They should starve. I mean, what the Al-Qassam Brigade, Islamic Jihad, there were 5 militant groups. No women, children, young babies went over. They're all innocent. There was a lot of men doing it. But true, there were also many who were cheering this. There are, of course, there are now this feeling of dehumanization on both sides, which pains me. And you will know the settlers and those who are really who tried to block aid trucks going into Gaza because the Gazans needed to starve, needed to be punished. All of them, etc. They were rats. They were not human, and so on. It depends, of course, when it also starts. Did it start on the 7th of October? Did it start before? When the Nakba was the Holocaust? When did it all start? Who are the rightful victims of this, etc.? I think we have to just reboot and say there's a lot of suffering on all sides. We need to reboot and look to the future. And I hope that we can work together to tell Israelis they deserve to live in peace and security, but they need some legitimacy in the eyes of the rest of the world, not just in the evangelical Republican right in the US. It's not enough. And to do that, there needs now to be a reaching out of a hand. I just one final just image. I sat down with a colleague of mine of NRC in Gaza. He had gotten out to Egypt. He told that he was of an old Gaza family. They'd been there for many, many generations in Gaza. His home was delivered from grandfather to father to son for generations. It had a wonderful garden, palm trees, etc. He described the home, and then he got a phone call one morning where Israel saying, if you love your children, you leave in 2 hours, pack and leave. We're going to destroy you. He didn't know if there was a tunnel way below his home. What he was an enemy of Hamas since the beginning of Hamas, a ruthless movement. And one sentence stuck with me. He says, the destruction of our family property will not be forgotten or forgiven for 5 generations. I don't think that's in the interest of Israel, really. I mean, this was a friend in many ways that was made an enemy. There is nothing to be achieved through the present military means on both sides.
Any more questions? I'll ask the final question, Jan. Some people still believe in two-state solution. Do you?
I do. I mean, the alternative would be a one-state solution with an Arab majority in a few years, or a one-state solution with apartheid, or a one-state solution with continuous occupation, which has never worked. Never worked. It didn't work since the Roman Republic. It hasn't worked. So I think there has to be some kind of a two-state solution. But I would also say, my friend, that it's not easier today in 2024 than it was in 1992. I mean, I saw there are 278 illegal settlements established since 1967. 857,000 Israelis have been transferred to occupied territory. According to international law, occupied territory since that time. It's more difficult now, but it's still possible. It's still possible. And there was a Good Friday agreement for Northern Ireland, and people had been killing each other for a very long time. They really hated each other. There was terror beyond belief. There has been a lot of agreements and difficult settlements made. I believe it can still happen, and I think the least improbable outcome is still a two-state solution, and I hope for, as I said, more visionary leadership on both sides, end to extremism, and then really tough international steering of a peace process.
Thank you. Thank you for ending with a somewhat positive message, Jan. And thanks for hooking by from all the way from Oslo. I'm sorry that you was unable to come here in person, but I'm glad that you were able to share your thoughts with us. I wish you a good afternoon in Oslo.
Thank you. Thanks for having me, and good luck. And thank you for your work for all of Israeli peace activists.